what's led us here? What's gotten us to this place where every newspaper you pick up, every blog you read, every article you read has to do with virtual workforces? What do you consider to be a virtual worker? I would posit to this group that from here going forward, you think about virtual workers as anyone who uses one of these devices. Anyone who is sitting at a desk and working on a laptop is a virtual worker. Who are they working with? I mean, when you think about it, they're working with the laptop. I mean, yes, they're working with other people, but they're really kind of directly communicating with the laptop. That's why it's called computer-mediated communication.
It's really helped businesses and ourselves in many, many ways. It's helped us to be more productive. In many ways, it adds to our innovation.
Anyone holding a BlackBerry, walking down the street with their BlackBerry, anyone using a cell phone is a virtual worker. I think we have to kind of expand our understanding because as we will see, we can have virtual distance in just as high levels between people sitting right next to each other as we can between people sitting thousands of miles apart. The other issue is we're not particularly trained to know which mode of communication to choose for any given communication. I wasn't trained to know when to use email versus when to pick up a phone versus when to be face-to-face. So I think that it's very important for us to begin to open and expand our minds to understand the scope of the issue that we're dealing with.
We have found a way to understand what makes people tick, especially in the digital age.
I mean, we still live in hierarchical societies. A recent research study that came out of Gartner's research group said that only one-third of companies in this country have any kind of formal virtual work telecommuting program. So what happens when you try to fit this type of model into this type of structure? We end up with a significant paradox. And the paradox is that as we become more connected, we can begin to feel more separate than ever. And I see this every day in corporations all over the world, where people are beginning to actually feel more isolated, even though they can connect to anyone in the world. I kind of want to just level set this conversation by quoting an evolutionary biologist who was cited in the book called Blink. And what he says is that most of human evolution basically took place face-to-face among groups of people who lived relatively close to each other.
If we don't address the people issues in a very real way, obviously that will have consequences to the organization. But how do we do that, right? As executives, how do we actually make that real and tangible?
When you think about how companies have evolved over the course of the industrial age, we really evolved as very vertically integrated enterprises. Three key things happened, I think, in the latter part of the 20th century to kind of catapult us into the type of organizations we're in today. The first was basically the Y2K issue, right? I mean, that kind of opened up the floodgates of how do we get work offshore in time to maintain all this code, fix it, so that when those clocks turned over to 000, all the computers in the world would not crash. We just didn't have enough people in this country to be able to fix all that code. At about the same time, we had Gary Hamel from Harvard University, along with C.K. Prahalad, come out with a famous paper on core competencies, right? And core competencies, this made a very important contribution. And companies started to look at this and say, you know, we really have to focus on our core competencies. The third thing that started to happen at the end of the century was we had another phenomenon by Henry Chesborough out of Harvard around something called open innovation. And what open innovation implied was kind of this further expansion and thought process around, you know, I think we can do better in terms of innovating if we open our doors to other corporations and try to pull in competitive ideas and innovative ideas from outside the company. So I call these kind of the triumvirate of change that happened towards the latter part of the 20th century. And it was this change that really started to underscore the importance for the need to communicate and collaborate across organizations.
It's really about trying to find the balance between how to leverage all of this great technology, but also hold on to and improve and enhance and enliven our own human spirit.
A few weeks ago when I was talking at Stanford University's MediaX lab, 2 articles came out, one right after the other in the Wall Street Journal. One of them was entitled, "Some Companies Rethink the Telecommuting Trend." The very next week, this is not an exaggeration, the same reporter comes out with the article that says far-flung employees need close contact and clear objectives, and managers learn how to bond. Some research was done about communications, and that once you get beyond 30 meters in physical locations, communication stops.